Yeah, I can change my name. I'll just put John. Do you want me to
Oh
just
no,
put?
no. I mean, like, could you make it as short as possible, just like a space, so nothing shows up? I want to see if it'll get rid of the.
Oh, sure. Oh, now it's switched to my full name.
Oh, good. Probably.
Um, so I just do that.
Wonder if I
There.
spelled that right. Did I spell your name right on the video, on the YouTube video?
Oh, I haven't. I'm not looking at the YouTube.
I will check. Video. Yeah. Yes, I did. I got it right. Okay, good. Oh, yeah,
Okay,
that
sweet.
works. That works really well. The capital
Oh, good.
I. Because yeah, it's because I zoomed in. It's really big, so smaller is
Oh,
better.
cool.
Um, it's really big. All right, sounds good. We got people in the audience. Everything is good. So, Jonathan, thanks again for coming on for the second time. Appreciate you taking the time to have a
Yeah. Thanks,
conversation.
Tom.
Uh,
Yeah.
you said you had other stuff to talk about or something.
Yeah, yeah. I've got a few things. Actually, I was kind of disappointed. I had this like big plan to make this dramatic presentation of the atheist nightmare. I was going to go like, behold the atheist nightmare, but we just ran out of bananas this morning. So I don't know, I don't know if you're
uh,
yeah,
comfort
familiar with that
jokes.
argument.
Yes.
Yeah, 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 yeah. But yeah, you kind of left me a bit perplexed when when we were talking about kind of more um, of the cosmological argument and talking about Aquinas and divine simplicity, particularly. And so I kind of did a little bit more research, and I kind of came to an answer. It's a lot more complex than I first imagined. Those kind of through the help of my friend Celia Hatherley, who's a Avicenna scholar. But I thought I also kind of wanted to present, more of a nominalistic argument, which came from this priest that I know, Father Cleveley, who actually is a convert from atheism, and I thought that might actually appeal a little bit more to your crowd, because it's he starts off with this
Well, what do you mean by
axiom.
nominalistic? Okay, nominalistic.
Nominalistic. Okay, so the difference between uh, essentialism and nominalism is basically that categories just have like names, and so that's kind of like, the modern view since like basically the 1500s. That all categories are just things that we actually apply names to rather than things that actually exist. So essential realism believes that there is actually such a thing as the essence of humanity, and so that's why kind of a lot of the classical arguments can kind of seem a little bit obscure in modern arguments, because there's been this like ongoing assumption that categories are just names that's existed for like 500 years, sometimes even before. Like um, Peter Abelard was a nominalist in the late 11th, early 12th century. So yeah, so nominalism has been around for a long time.
Well, just to clarify, like most people aren't nominalists. Like some things that we refer to do exist. Like the sun. The sun exists. It's a real thing.
Sure. Yeah, but like but the sun, yeah, but the sun also, the essential realism would assert that the sun, participates in the essence of, starness, and that that's a real thing.
Right. So,
So
so just to clarify,
yeah,
like normally people don't say all things are just categories humans made up, and all
right.
things are real, meaningful words that refer to reality. But there's a combination of the two. So the same would apply to my position. I don't think all words are just made up concepts. Just some of them are. So wouldn't be a
Oh,
global
okay.
position there.
Yeah, but I guess like the difference is that it's, that the name itself, like the category, for instance, actually has like an existence, like Plato's like world of the forms, or like that was kind of converted into oh, it says my video is going live at 1:30. Oops, so I misscheduled it. Oh well, whatever. They can just watch it on YouTube. Um, yeah, but so yeah, the and that was converted into Christianity, sort of like, the essences existing in the mind of God, and so they have real existence even though they don't exist in our world. So that's kind of and that was held by a lot of thinkers up until kind of the the
Science.
modern science and stuff like that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but yeah. Oh,
All right.
sorry.
So what was
Sorry.
the argument you wanted to talk about?
So the argument basically from nominalism kind of comes from Wittgenstein, and at the end, I just was recently reading through the Tractatus again, and are you familiar with? You're probably familiar with Tractatus.
Yeah, Tractatus, Logico,
Yeah,
Philosophicus, something like that.
yeah,
One
yeah.
of those.
So at the end, kind of Wittgenstein has this kind of enigmatic statement that says that the mystery of things is not how the mystery in the world is not how it is, but that it is. And so Father Philip kind of goes into this really sort of interesting sort of dialectic about the world being like that it is, into the being of the world. So you can say that that things actually have existence outside of our thoughts, and there is something kind of mysterious to that, even though it's something that we all take for granted. I can have a friend who I really love, and I can think of him all the time, but those thoughts can never actually produce his actual existence. His actual existence is something that exists beyond my capacity to thought. The fact that how he exists and now enables me to think about him, but extramentally, for him to exist, there has to be something for him. There has to be some principle for his existence. He has a sheer existence, and so we can explain how he exists, but that he exists is kind of an entity unto itself. It's not something that we can explain, and that's something that we can apply to the whole world. We can have all these elaborate arguments and explanations about how the world is, but that it is a completely different matter. It is mysterious, as Wittgenstein sort of asserts, and Russell kind of conceded that point as well. He said, yes, the existence of the world indeed is a mystery, but we just have to accept it as a brute fact. And that's one out in a way, but the fact that the world exists doesn't explain itself. It causes us to ponder, why is the world, just like why do I exist? Those are questions that science itself can't answer. Science itself
I am
takes
lost.
for granted.
I'm not following the
Oh,
structure
okay.
of the argument. So the reality has to exist. There can't be a philosophical nothing,
Sure.
and there's always
Yeah.
going to be a mystery to why it exists. You can fill that mystery with it's a necessity in its nature, either from a god or from naturalistic pantheism or whatever, or you could say it's a brute contingency, either from a god or from naturalistic pantheism or whatever. But that's I don't see how this in any way relates to the discussion in some ways. Just I'm not following the structure of the
Yeah, sure.
argument.
I mean, it's a long-winded argument, basically to say in a very crude syllogistic fashion that that being exists, and God is being, therefore God exists.
Well, that seems to beg the question. Like, yes, stuff exists, and if you label that stuff with God, then okay, that's fine. But the question is that fundamental nature of reality a conscious mind, or is it a non-conscious thing? That's what we want to know. So just calling reality itself, labeling reality God, doesn't really get us anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, it gets us, some places. Like, Father Philip, he is still a nominalist, so he wouldn't actually say through reason that it gets us, much further than this, like, wonder that the world actually does in fact exist.
Well, I mean, I don't think
But
that argument gets us literally anywhere, because all it's stating
mm,
is reality exists, and then you just label reality with God, the label God, which means nothing other than reality. So reality exists is essentially the argument. Like, yes, I agree, reality exists, totally.
well, then we agree. But that's basically Aquinas's understanding of God, is that God is being. Now that doesn't. Now there's a distinction between
Well, the problem,
being and myself.
well, the problem
Yeah.
with Aquinas's view is that he has lots of entailments into what being is. It has lots of other
Right.
properties in it, and then that's the part that's up
Sure.
for debate. So just saying that reality exists and reality is being, like being just equals reality. That's just a tautology. It doesn't mean anything. You're just still saying reality exists. The problem is
Right.
that when Aquinas asserts all of these other things that are in the being that there's no evidence for, that's the problem.
Right. So yeah, like for instance, like oneness. Like would you say that somehow all of reality is somehow one thing? Would you agree with that? Like
Um,
for instance, in a way, like I can say that that everything in the world or in the cosmos has being. This is
So
this
I
is kind of going.
could
Yeah.
say that there is some fundamental field of energy that makes up literally everything, and then we're just different kinds of knots in the energy field, and so it's all just one big string. So we are all technically the same thing. That is a possibility, or we could be discrete things, and we just label the all of the set of discrete things as reality, and that's all one set, which is an abstract set. So either one of those is possible.
Okay, but what about the things that are privations of energy? Like if you grant that there's like like a mile of like empty space, even though
Still energy.
it's like still energy,
Yep.
like space is energy.
Yep. Still a field. So all of the different fields are all different versions of energy.
Okay, but conceptually, couldn't you have something that where there is nothing, like a true sort of like
Yep.
vacuum of existence? Okay,
So
so
both of the hypotheses are, one is that everything, including space and time, is all of the essence of energy, so it's all oneness, or it's discrete things, like there's a particle over there and a particle over there, and there's literally nothing existing between them or something, and they're completely discrete universes unto themselves or whatever, and that's also possible. So either one of those is possible.
I don't quite understand. Can you like maybe elaborate on that a little bit more?
So a reality which is nothing but oneness, it's all one thing.
Hmm.
That's a possibility. So it's just energy everywhere, and everything is nothing but
Oh,
energy. And another
okay.
possibility is that there's energy, and then there's some other thing that's in a completely discrete state that isn't connected to energy, and it also exists, and it's a separate thing. And there might be no kind of thing in between them, like a nothingness, empty space kind of an idea. And that's also possible. So both kinds of universes, one where it's just all oneness and one essence that is everything, and another that is there's discrete things that are completely separate. Both of those are possibles, and there's doesn't really
Okay,
make a difference which
but
one.
like if you take all of those possibilities, don't doesn't like any possibility need something actual in order for those possibilities to actually become actualized?
I don't know what that means. Like
Like
they
for
aren't.
instance,
Reality isn't
yeah,
a possibility that became actualized. It is an actualization. It is actualized inherently. So, and whichever
sure,
one is reality is the one that has always been actualized. It's not like they changed, or they were both ideas and then became actualized. That's not how it works.
sure, but there is potentiality in every possible universe. Like it can be something other than it is. That it can change. It's changeable.
It's irrelevant. The fact that we can imagine something being different is irrelevant to whether or not it is actually different or could have actually been different. So our ability to imagine something being different does not actually mean it could be different. I can
But
imagine God
oh,
differently,
sure,
but doesn't
sure.
mean that God is necessarily could be different.
Well, yeah, but that's kind of taking a different definition of God,
Well,
essentially.
no. So it doesn't matter what definition of God you use here. That's irrelevant to the argument. The thing is
Hmm.
that you imagine God cannot be changed. I imagine God can be changed. One of us is right. One of us is wrong. Reality determines which of those is right and which of those is wrong, not your definition. Your definition is irrelevant. So the problem here is that when we want to know which is the case, or if it's the case that the universe can or cannot be changed, the determining factor is reality, not your definition. So the fact that you can imagine the universe being different doesn't matter at all, because maybe the universe couldn't have been different and you just don't know it.
Oh, sure.
Or the fact that I imagine God could be different. Well, maybe he can't be different. Maybe there's some inherent property that he must be necessarily the same, and that can't be different. So you can't determine that it could have been otherwise in anything other than your imagination.
Oh, well, sure. I mean, I'm not talking necessarily about the universe as it exists, but that within the universe there is change. That there's all these existence that is made up of of a whole series of existence that are subject to change.
Sure.
That's yeah, there's a common experience.
Yes.
So yeah, so I mean,
What is
but
that? How does that relate to the topic of the? Because that has nothing to do with the necessary thing.
well, it does. Are you familiar with the distinction between essentially ordered series and accidentally ordered series?
Vaguely, but it doesn't make a difference to the ontology. So it doesn't change the fact that either one could be the case for the universe. So, for example, there could be a necessary thing, a necessary energy state that then created contingent energy states, and they can all change. That's perfectly fine. And the necessary energy state doesn't change one bit. So there could be a necessary non-changing fundamental thing in the universe, or there could be a necessary changing, eternally changing thing in the universe. Either of those is possible. There's no preferred one there.
Okay, maybe just let me walk with me a little bit in this distinction between these essentially ordered series and these accidentally ordered series, because I think that's kind of where this argument's kind of proceeding into, and this is kind of what I mentioned before for the Avicenna thing. So so an essentially ordered series is a series that is kind of necessarily finite. So like a hand that's holding a stick that's moving a rock. So if any of the if at any stage that first necessary cause in that series is removed, then that chain of causality will immediately end. Like uh, imagining that it's not like down a hill or something like that. But the the what's categorical of that series is that the causality in that series is both bestowed and sustained. So it's whereas an accidentally ordered series, it could actually be potentially infinite. Because you can remove the first the first causality, the thing that makes the next things in the series be caused, and therefore you could go back infinitely. Like if and the an example of that is a grandfather who begets a father who begets a son. If the grandfather ceases to exist, that doesn't necessarily remove the existence of the son. The son still continues to exist despite the non-existence of the grandfather. So yeah, you admit that there's those two categories of series exist.
Sure. And there's also
Yeah.
categories that could be infinite and necessary. Those are perfectly fine.
Oh, that's actually exactly what Avicenna kind of argues against, is that if it's because necessity in its in its own category can't in order for something to be necessary, it has to either be necessary in itself or necessary through another. If you admit that something's part of an essentially ordered series.
Sure, but the series itself can be necessary in
The
itself.
series itself.
Yeah.
Well, what we're talking about when we're talking about causes, we're talking about actually beings who are agents of cause. We're not necessarily talking about like a necessary sort of principle uh, of necessity.
Sure, but either way, you can just say that there is essentially a necessarily bubble of energy in the universe that is infinitely changing and necessary and never can stop changing. And it's all a necessary thing, just one necessary thing, which is just a giant bubble of changing quantum vacuum states.
Mm. But that but that would be it would be but then that would entail that everything within that series within that system is itself necessary.
Sure, that's fine.
Okay, but then what if it ceases to, what if something in that series then ceases to exist? Would the whole series then cease to exist?
Either one is possible. So you can have like a necessary particle that has a life of 7 years or whatever, and so after 7 years it completely ceases to exist, but everything else could still exist, and that would be fine. Or you could
Yeah,
have them.
that's by definition an accidentally ordered series then.
No, it could still be a necessarily ordered series. Like there's no contradiction there.
No, but what's characteristic of an essentially ordered series is that it is necessarily finite. That because the causation uh, is both being bestowed and sustained. So it's like the hands are sort of like moving continually an object. And once those hands are moved, even if there's like a whole long series of the chain, then it ceases. Then the whole chain ceases to move.
Uh, so there could be a link of the chain that goes off and ceases to exist, and the rest of the chain is fine.
Yeah, but there has to be but in an essentially ordered series, there has to be a beginning. There is I'm not
No, no, there
necessarily
doesn't.
arguing.
No, there doesn't.
Hmm?
There doesn't have to be a beginning for that at all.
Oh, for an essentially ordered series, just in the definition, like I just you can agree or disagree with my definition
Well,
of an
I'm not
essentially
talking
ordered
about the
series.
series themselves. I don't really care about how you define different philosophical concepts of series. All I care
Right.
about is what's the possible origin of the universe. It's possible there was a necessary changing thing that's been eternal. There's a possible that's a necessary changing thing that's outside of space-time. There's a possible there's a necessary singular thing. There's a necessary multiple things. All of those are possibilities. You haven't eliminated any of the different possibilities there. So how you define series, it doesn't make a difference. You can define them however you want. I don't care at all. All I care about is
Sure.
what is the necessary thing that grounds the universe, and you haven't eliminated any of the possibilities.
Well, the problem with having a whole bunch of things that are necessary, sort of in these series, more that aren't necessarily that aren't necessitated by their by their own being or by another being, is that if they is that they would have to, in order for something to be well, if something exists possibly, in order for it to actually come into existence, if there's something that, like say if there's, a star can be, possibly born in, next to Alpha Centauri, in order for that to actually come into existence, it actually has to uh, exist necessarily either through itself or through something else. Right, so there has to be some sort of like there has to be some sort of causation for it to exist, or it just has to arrive of its own nature necessarily into existence, right?
If you're saying like there are multiple necessary things, one of the necessary things is a star, and the star begins to exist. That
Well, no, like that the principle is that everything that exists necessarily uh, either through itself or through something else. So it's
no,
necessitated.
no. So there can be a thing that exists necessarily, and then there can be contingent things that are a result of that necessary thing. But if that necessary thing is determined, then all of those contingent things are also necessary, but they themselves don't necessarily exist. They're just a necessary cause of what necessarily exists.
Yeah, but in order for them to actually be a cause, they first have to be an effect. Yeah,
Sure. So they're an effect of the necessary thing, but those effects themselves are not the necessary thing, but they're necessary
yeah,
effects.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you got that. So in order for that chain to work, there has to be something necessary that is necessary in itself and not necessary through another.
Sure.
Okay, and so
Reality.
that's the thing. That's reality, and that's what I would also say is God. And that's all you
Okay,
can do
but that's the same statement you said before. So reality exists,
yeah,
and you label that with the word God, which means the same thing as reality and has no greater meaning whatsoever. Okay. It's still naturalistic
yeah.
pantheism. You're just relabeling naturalistic pantheism God.
Well, no, because the things that exist because there's things that are contingent upon that existence. Because because there's the effects that are either that are caused by the previous necessary cause.
Which is all compatible with naturalistic pantheism. So you're just taking naturalistic pantheism and relabeling it God. I'm going to steal that.
Well,
that is my new
actually,
argument. I'm stealing the theistic argument. You're relabeling naturalistic pantheism.
Well, actually, yeah, there is a possibility for pantheism in sort of the Aquinas's model. Like he even actually admits, like, through rationality, you can just have a you can have the eternity of the world equally as much as you have the the finite existence of the world. That's actually kind of Aquinas's argument. But Avicenna has a little bit more elaborate argument, which I've been kind of going into a little bit here.
So I am missing, because my whole argument is that everything could be explained equally or better by a non-conscious, natural, necessary thing, and then, conscious,
the
necessary
consciousness.
thing.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I mean, we can't really argue for rationally for God's consciousness. I mean, I think that's something that that would be in the realm of faith more so than the realm of reason.
Okay, but isn't that just kind of admitting that the whole atheist position is correct?
Well, no, because not if the atheist position is asserting that that God positively does not exist. I mean,
well, no, so most
atheists
atheists claim that there's no reason to believe in a God, and that everything in the reality can be explained by natural things like naturalistic pantheism without any reference to a non-physical consciousness. That is essentially the basis of the vast majority of atheists' positions, that everything can be explained by nature. You don't need a conscious entity there to do it. So everything you said seems to be compatible with that version of atheism.
I guess if you just go in from like a positively sort of like reason positively from reason, but I guess the the distinction is that if pantheism considers everything to be God,
That's
correct?
just some of the versions. So no, it doesn't entail that.
Oh, it doesn't. Okay.
It doesn't even have the word God in it. And like naturalistic pantheism is, if you just go to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy for pantheism, the section on naturalistic pantheism just means it doesn't have any additional entailments other than what is ontologically granted by science, essentially.
So it's weird though. But why would it have the word theism in it at all then?
Why does the word atheism have theism? Why does the word diletheism have the word theism? Is it diletheism is just a logic that has contradictions in it. So I mean, it has nothing to do with a God. The fact that it has the word theism is irrelevant to the etymology. It's not important.
Right.
It's essentially the reason it has the word theism is to represent it's an alternative basis of the necessary grounds of reality that has nothing to do with a God, and it's just a natural thing. So it's natural pantheism because it's a replacement for this God hypothesis in that it fills the necessary thing gap with a non-conscious entity.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. But I guess the only difference then between the theism and the naturalistic pantheism is that there is a different sort of a relation between God, the being God, who is being, and everything else that participates in being. Because you can say
that relationship would be the same. So that relationship is that there's this necessary essence of the naturalistic pantheism, which is being, is how you define it, and then there are the contingent things, which are a result or an effect of that being, or partake in being, or whatever way you want to phrase it. That would be the same as one of the possibilities.
That's basically the same thing that Aristotle believes then, like that there's, but he just calls it kind of like the prime mover. And that there's all these sort of and then the whole world sort of like exists contingently in relation to that necessary thing.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. So the only difference there would be is that naturalistic pantheism gets rid of all of the consciousness part. So no.
Well, Aristotle didn't even believe in the consciousness of the prime mover necessarily.
Yeah. So essentially, that's the foundation of my argument, is that everything, all of the theistic arguments and evidence, can be explained by this non-conscious foundation of necessary reality, which is essentially just what science is leaning towards indicating.
I don't think you could necessarily through reason argue for God's consciousness, because even Aquinas admits that God's essence is unknown. So you can't prove it through reason. It's just pure, it's mystery. So anything particular about God. You can deduce. He tries to go further that you can deduce. Like principles from God, like goodness and oneness, but those do have like a lot of metaphysical assumptions to them. So if you have like more of a symbolic understanding of language, like Wittgenstein or something, then it wouldn't actually be sensible, because you're just talking about like being as if it's something, and so it kind of it diverts past kind of like the state of affairs.
Okay, I'm fine
So
with that.
yeah, so I mean, I just have a kind of a richer understanding of what language can actually do, but that's also connected to my faith. So because I believe that reason can actually talk about realities that are beyond the state of affairs, but that is in itself a faith-based claim.
Okay, so I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, like if you admit that there isn't
yeah,
anything about naturalistic pantheism that can't explain everything about reality that the theists, the ones who argue for consciousness can, then I mean, yeah,
from just purely rational standpoint. I mean, I guess the only thing then that we could argue about is what we talked about more in the previous argument about like miracles and signs for God's existence in the visible world.
sure, yeah, that would be novel testable predictions. Like miracles would definitely be evidence. I'd
Yeah,
be happy to grant those. I just don't think they have happened.
yeah. There's like it'd be hard to actually sort of like conceptually come up with a well, it's hard to actually present something that would actually qualify as as sorry, what, how did you define evidence
Novel
again? That
testable
was
predictions.
knowledge prediction. Yeah, so I did think of one actually
Well,
that it's
I
not
pray
that's
for a
not
gold
it's
brick and a
conceptual.
gold brick appears in front of me. That
Well,
was
yeah,
one.
I mean that's kind of assuming God's sort of like like a machine or something like that.
Well, it doesn't like the
It's
nature
like
of God here doesn't matter. It's just about the nature of novel testable prediction. So you
right,
assume a nature of God, whatever you want it to be, and then you say if God has this nature, we expect this consequence. We do a test to see if that consequence happens. We say, we found the consequence, therefore we have a good reason to believe God has this nature. So if I say if God has the nature of giving me gold bricks, when I pray for it, and I pray for a gold brick and one appears, that's a good reason to believe that God is there and He has this nature. So that would be a
sure,
novel testable prediction, which would be evidence of God if He had this nature. You can replace His nature with whatever you want. That's just how science works. You just pick any hypothesis. You say if this thing exists and does this, we're going to see this. And so
yeah. I mean, but that's kind of assuming that God is sort of like an actual sort of observable reality that that interacts in a predictable way with the world.
no, that's just what we would need to do to show it isn't imaginary. So for anything that
Mm,
isn't imaginary, to show that it actually exists independent of our imagination, you would need some way to differentiate whether it was one of the imaginary things or the real things. And the only way that we have to do that effectively is that because our imaginations cannot represent reality very accurately, we can't like predict the next lottery numbers very well. If you could come up with a model that can produce the lottery numbers very accurately every single month, that's very good evidence that that model is more than just our imagination. Because our imagination is bad at representing reality. This model is very good at representing reality. So if you have something like that, where you have this model that can predict something about reality, then that's good evidence it's not imaginary. So
I,
it's not necessarily about God's nature here. It's just about how do we show it's not in our imagination.
I've got a conceptual sort of a hypothetical example of how something like that could work. So in the Catholic tradition, there's this blood miracle by Januarius. Now, this isn't something I totally base my faith on, but there's this idea that 3 days of the year, the blood that this blood like kind of liquefies as just kind of and he was like a martyr from the 4th century or something like that. So if conceivably that was able to happen like in a reliable sort of testable way, and it only happened on those days and not any other time, and that you could like carbon date it back to like time near that time when it actually came from, and actually put it like like in a lab and have it observed for say a couple years, that would probably
Yep.
would that qualify as novel testable prediction?
Yep.
Yeah, well that's in that case doesn't hold, because there's they don't want to test it because this is like an old specimen, and then they're worried that it'll come in. I'm not necessarily totally convinced by the miracle either. I mean, as
Well,
Catholics, we
those
don't
have all been
actually have
tested and they've all been proven false. So all of the blood
oh,
miracles have been tested as far as I'm aware, and they realize they're not. It's actually just rust mixed with water in some cases, and that there's been some biological material mixed in to make it seem real. All of those have been tested and been proven false, 100%.
oh, well, this one hasn't been tested just because it's, they haven't allowed scientists to actually, open it up and actually, test a sample from it. So it's just something that's kind of ongoing, and it could be like, conceivably just something that's kind of being held onto as a way of, deceiving people. But or it could just be something, more naive, that it's like, it's like, oh, we just don't want to, ruin this, precious, relic of the church or something like
Yeah,
that.
that could
But
definitely
yeah.
not be it, because if they actually had a
Mm.
verifiable miracle of God, they would not hide it. This would be front page news everywhere. We have proven God. We have
Oh,
good
I know,
evidence of God. So
but do you know conceivably why like a Christian would say like why there's not these like miracles that are proof of God?
no, they would all want to say that. That's
Well,
like the
no, no,
apologist
because
wet dream.
no. The reason why is because then you wouldn't actually be able to have saving faith, because faith actually in order to be saved, we actually have to have faith that goes beyond any desire of provability. No,
Could you
that's
imagine that
defined in
William
the
Lane
text.
Craig, like he has actual evidence of a God, and he's like, I'm just not going to present this because I want you to have delusional faith. So I'm going to present the
Oh yeah,
worst
no, but I
arguments
mean,
imaginable just because I could convince you with this real evidence, but I'm not going to present that. No, why would
no,
I
no,
do
no,
that?
yeah. No, but he doesn't. But it's in kind of in God's. This is obviously like all talking about the realm of faith, but that it wouldn't actually be faith if God was was tangibly proven. There actually has to be an element of belief that actually comes from the individual beyond just sheer evidence in order for a person to be saved. At least in our tradition, that's what we believe, that you actually have to sort of like make that leap of faith in order for it to be saving, because it's not faith if it's just completely solid evidence.
Sure. So, but what I hear you saying is that no, I cannot provide a way to differentiate imagination from reality, because if we did that, then we'd have reason to believe it's real.
Well, I mean, you would have to like, yeah, I mean, you have to believe, yeah, I mean, like there is there is evidence, there's just not conclusive evidence, like, I mean,
Or what's the
yeah.
evidence? Where's the evidence that is non-conclusive?
Well, miracles happen all the time. Even my, but they're just not conclusive. Like my dad, like last week, he received some prayer, and then he lost this like pain that he had from like 18 years. Like he had this like chronic, really debilitating pain, and then a couple people prayed over him, and he's pain free. I mean, it could be there's definitely natural causes that can
Why do
actually
you
explain that.
consider that evidence? So you said that's evidence, it's just not conclusive. No, I don't see that as evidence at all. I
Oh,
see there
right.
is a
Yeah,
phenomenon we
in your
haven't explained.
sure.
So
Yeah.
the fact there's a phenomenon we haven't explained isn't evidence of hypothesis X, because I mean that's an argument from ignorance. Like we can't explain that, therefore God. Like that's not evidence. That's an argument from ignorance.
Oh, sure. I mean, yeah, I don't think we can come up with. I guess according to your definition of evidence, yeah, I don't think that we can actually achieve anything like that, because God is unknowable. God just like is, so it's like trying to you know prove or explain existence in itself. It's a mystery.
Well, I mean, I can definitely imagine things like a gold brick that would work, but so it seems like the standard we have for just someone discovered a new species of animal is too high of a standard for God. So, I mean, would you
No, but it's
accept that
just
someone discovered a unicorn just based off of their testimony?
well, no, but that's just an observable reality, whereas God isn't an observable reality. God just is. He doesn't have any, composition. That's like this is going back to like the whole thing about divine simplicity, right? Like like you argued, why is it different from like why can't you just replace God with a molecule? I remember you talked about that with Spiegel, like why can't you just replace him with like this, and then and the reason for that is because that molecule has like composition. It kind of begs the question how it was composed, but God doesn't have composition. He just
Particle doesn't
is.
have composition either, so that would be a misrepresentation. So this is actually an argument brought up by
Oh,
Graham Opie, one of the leading atheist philosophers in the world right now. That you could just replace God with a necessary particle that has equally as representative properties, just not the consciousness. So it's just equally as powerful, equally as singular, equally as being, equally as pure essence. None of the consciousness stuff, and you get the same result.
Okay, but
But
would it be so? But would it still be, being in a sense? Like,
yep,
that's
there's no
that's the
consciousness. Still being, still perfect essence, still perfect actuality, no consciousness.
right. Yeah. So that would be like, kind of Aristotle's God then.
Yeah, like the naturalistic pantheism view that I
Right.
take.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
but I
So
wanted to go
that's
back to saying that so evidence we would not be sufficient to show the existence of a unicorn, which is just like a horse with a horn on its head. Somehow that the evidence that would not be sufficient to even indicate something that simple is somehow good enough for the fundamental nature of all of reality. Like I think there is a fundamental misunderstanding of the burden of proof here. Like extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and saying that a unicorn exists is significantly less extraordinary than saying there is an ultimate nature of the reality, which is God and Jesus and et cetera, et cetera. Those would be
well. I
significantly
mean,
more extraordinary. So if evidence isn't good enough to show unicorns exist, then it's definitely not good enough to show that God exists.
well, sure. I mean, but like, what are you like? I don't know. Like, what? Yeah, I don't know. Like, I just don't think that observable evidence is necessarily the the best way of proving an unseen God. Like, it'd
Well,
be
that's
you're trying to
perfectly
like, yeah,
fine. So my position is that you can
yeah,
present any way you want to differentiate imagination from reality. Now I use testable predictions. So testable predictions is the way that I know that works to do this. If you have another way that
mm.
works, let me know. I'm happy to try and figure this out if it does or not. Let's go. What are the other ways that can effectively differentiate imagination from reality other than predictions?
Well, existence. And come
Look at
back
the
to the same definition
trees.
of God.
Like what?
Yeah, I mean,
Oh, Manorite.
that's
Manorite asks, "What is your favorite cheese?" Super chat from Manorite. What is your favorite cheese? He asks
oh,
that
my
every
favorite
time.
cheese. Oh, interesting. Yeah. I kind of like, I don't know. I kind of like brie as a as kind of a standard go-to cheese. There's a lot of other fancier cheeses that I like, but I like just kind of brie as a standard cheese.
I like American cheese. I like to put that's my
Nice.
favorite kind on cheeseburgers and omelets. It's
Really? Oh,
the
interesting. Yeah.
cheapest, most processed kind. It's the best.
Like Velveeta, like the old school American
Well, that's
cheese.
cheddar. Velveeta just cheddar. But
Oh, it is. Okay.
yeah, I do like Kraft, like in the little plastic packages that like open up and you put them on. It's
Oh, wow.
more processed than Velveeta. But
Okay.
anyway,
Yeah.
uh, so how does this like? You said that there is existence. Like I don't know if you were joking or not. But you said existence is a way to differentiate imagination from reality.
Sure. I mean, like, that comes back to that principle of Wittgenstein, that that not how the world is, but that it is the mystery. And so God is in principle, mysterious and unknowable through reason alone. I mean, he can reveal himself, and I believe that he has, but that faith
Wait a minute. I
isn't
think you just
something that you
contradicted
can
yourself.
surprise.
So
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
because my question was how do you differentiate imagination from reality? And you said you can't with rationality.
Oh, no, no, no. That's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm just talking about I was just talking uh about God, and yeah, yeah. But I guess, oh yeah, interesting. Yeah. So I guess how you would differentiate that, to answer your question more, is that it is that it's just not that it's not just like a product of thought, right? The difference between, whether or not I think of someone, the fact that how someone is, can think of all these reasons and explanations for how someone is, but that doesn't explain. It still begs the question that that they exist, or why they exist.
Okay,
So
not following.
existence, yeah,
One second,
it's
another super chat. J Theist Jones says, Jason,
yeah.
you must only refer to TJump as daddy from now here on out. Hilarious, hilarious.
Okay.
But so my question is in order to show anything exists independent of our imagination, we need some way to differentiate for any hypothesis whether it is imaginary or is real. And so for God, you're saying God is not imaginary, and so I'm asking you, well, how do you show that? And you just said, well, he you just said, well, it
Well,
is something outside of our
if
imagination.
God is, if just God is just in a mere, if God just is merely sort of, existence, if just the way that, like, that naturalistic pantheism argument is just basically the same as saying, that that particle is God, and so so what's a system that you believe is kind of more evidentiary than existence as being something necessary that exists outside of the actual world, that the actual world participates in this mysterious reality that is existence.
Well, I think novel testable predictions is the only way. I don't think anything else works as far as I'm aware, other than uh, just things about our imagination. So, like logic and math, just thinking about stuff can show imaginary things, but it can't show things that are not imaginary.
Well, then you're just reducing all thought to just observation.
Uh, no, I'm saying thought is thought. Thought is imagination, and then to show something is not imagination, well, then we have to do some method to show that it's not imagination. So everything starts as imaginary because everything is starts as an idea in our heads, and then we need some additional feature other than just it's an imagination in our heads to show it's more than that. And the way we do that is because our imagination is very bad at predicting the future. If we have a method that is very good at predicting the future, then that is a good reason to believe that that method is more than just our imagination. But I'm not seeing how you've presented by saying existence. I don't see how that can show the difference between my imagining of a unicorn or a leprechaun or a fairy or a god or anything. I don't see how that works.
Well, that's taking a lot more for granted about God than my definition grants. So, like my definition is the one that you just said doesn't really prove anything. It's just because we're saying that God is
Reality
being,
exists and God is
yeah,
reality.
yeah,
Uh, okay, but so I'm fine with that part. Like obviously reality exists. We can make novel testable predictions about reality existing, so that we can
yeah,
confirm just fine. The
yeah.
the question is the next part because you mentioned there are these other things, these other evidences of miracles, and these miracles are not
Oh,
conclusive, but they
okay, the
are
miracles, yeah.
evidence, right?
No, I mean, yeah, I guess they're not evidence in the way that you would sort of talk about evidence. But they just point to, and not even necessarily, because the reality with miracles is that they're not there actually to prove God's existence. They're there just to help confirm the faith of things that people already have. But you can't arrive at faith through reason.
So what do
That's
you mean by
actually
confirm here? Because when I hear the word confirm or is evidence, I'm thinking this is a way to indicate, not with 100% certainty, that it is a non-imaginary thing. Like this helps us gives us reason to believe it is a non-imaginary thing. Is
mm,
what I think conclude or evidence or reason or indicates means is that we have a reason to believe that this thing is not one of the imaginary things. It may not be enough to conclude it with certainty or a sufficient amount, but it moves the dial in that direction. That's what I hear you saying when you say that
oh, right, yeah,
the miracles are doing
yeah. So
this.
yeah, I guess it sort of it gives like further confirmation to something that I've already received outside of myself, because faith isn't something that that isn't just purely like a human act, something, again, this is, and even the definition of faith itself kind of comes from faith, but it's something that's received from God, that you have this belief that has been bestowed in you, and that there's certain principles in that faith that are in themselves unprovable, through reason. Like specifically and doctrinally, those are like the Trinity and the Incarnation. Those are two realities that you couldn't actually reach through reason, but through like sort of like the lens of sort of faith and of God of God's actual and sort of taking an assumption of God's existence, then you can come to start proving all of these other assertions of God as well. But if you just have like a materialistic outlook, then it wouldn't really be possible to do that, because
Well, I wouldn't
faith,
say
yeah.
that. So I would say that if suppose the Hindu god is real, and if you pray to the Hindu god, he gives you a gold brick every time you pray to the Hindu god. I think that using reason, we can understand the ultimate nature of reality that way. We can say, yeah, the Hindu god is the real one because we have reason to believe it's not imaginary through this test.
Well, yeah, but then no one would. But then no one would have faith in the Hindu God. Everyone would just accept that he
But
actually
you
is.
claimed you can't know this through reason, or you can't indicate this with reason. And I'm saying, well, yeah, you can't. Like the ultimate nature of reality
Oh,
can be
sure,
indicated
sure,
by
sure.
reason,
Yeah,
and I don't need to
yeah,
presuppose anything about naturalism to do this. It has nothing to do with
yeah,
any claim of naturalism. So
sure.
it seems like you're admitting that the miracles do not move the dial more towards it being non-imaginary. It's only that the miracles are reiterating your own prior faith claim, and that because you
Yeah,
have faith, you believe this will happen. This happens, therefore it reiterates your faith. Something like that.
yeah. It is kind of circular, but like faith itself is, is a kind of a supernatural claim. If I say I have faith, it's that I've actually received something from God. So that in itself is a faith-based claim. So it's not just like worldly, faith, like belief in the sun is something that's kind of, that's part of it. Like, from our part, we have to like actively, continue to believe, but it's also kind of synergistic that there's this divine element to it as well, that is
Oh,
bestowed.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another super chat. J Atheist Jones says, so what is the alternative to observable evidence, and what makes that alternative viable? Like, it seems to me like you're saying there isn't one. It's just someone else asked, like, it seems like you're just using confirmation bias as your guide here. It seems like you have a belief, and your belief would expect this, and it happens, therefore it confirms your belief, kind of a thing.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I guess, yeah, it totally would be a bias. Like, I mean, there is like, because you have like when you have like something that happens, like, like there was in 2006, there was this I'm just gonna like, I could just lift a litany of miracles, but I just like, list one. There, in 2006, there was this guy who was working on this big truck, and then the truck came down and the axle sort of like landed on his stomach, and then the doctors, went to, and his like small intestine was destroyed, and then the doctors found that, part of, after like opening him up, that part of like his small intestine had, regenerated. I don't know if you've heard about this particular miracle, but yeah, but it's one that enough that my, convinced my doctor that healing actually is a reality. But I don't know. Are you familiar with that one in particular?
I'm familiar with a lot of spontaneous healings, but that's a pretty
Yeah.
natural phenomenon that happens in lots of cases, mostly
Mm.
discovered to all be biology. Like the more impressive ones are like having really bad cancer or really bad colon polyps that just disappear overnight, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
those have all been discovered to be like, oh, there's actually a protein that causes those, and if you get the protein at the what's it?
Yeah.
Forget the composition of stuff in your stomach. If you change it in certain ways, it can have these really profound effects. There's lots of stuff like that in biology that we see. So I wouldn't
Yeah. Yeah.
consider there is hair as a phenomenon we can't explain. I wouldn't consider that
Sure.
a
Oh,
confirmation of
interesting.
faith. Like I'd say,
Yeah.
I have faith, therefore things will happen that I can't explain. Things happen I can't explain, therefore my faith.
Well,
Like,
well, I mean, it's like it's that they happen, somehow in like in proximity with prayer and belief. But I guess, maybe they do happen with atheists as well. I mean, but all of that would just be, the action of God, because science is kind of the invisible, is kind of how God invisibly acts throughout the world. That's kind of how Georges Lemaitre, defined it, who's the who invented the big, who proposed the Big Bang theory, right? So science in the Catholic view, at least, isn't at all compatible um, with belief. You could actually take every miracle and have like, a scientific explanation for that, and that wouldn't, threaten the paradigm of God at all.
sure, I mean, you could say that everything we see was created by leprechauns 5 seconds ago, and that would also be not incompatible. So
Well, sure. I mean, yeah. I
it's the
mean,
problem of underdetermination. Like you can take all of the past data and make it fit any hypothesis you want, like
sure.
leprechauns 5 seconds ago, or brain in a vat, matrix, magic pixies, whatever. Which is why we consider that not to be evidence, because all of the imaginary ones can do that. The real one can do that plus something else, which is the novel testable predictions thing. So the fact that you would expect, because you have faith, you expect miracles to take place in the presence of Christian prayer. Like if Christian prayer happens all the time, all over the world, and this was just a random phenomenon, like rain happens in the presence of Christian prayer. Does that mean that rain
Oh,
is a
sure,
sign from God? Probably not, because it also happens when there
sure,
were no
yeah,
humans.
yeah. Well, and it's even in the Bible that like that the sun shines on the just and the unjust alike. So it's yeah. So even like even these miraculous occurrences very well could happen with an unbeliever. So it's yeah. I mean, it's at the end, there at the end of it all, there is kind of like a pretty stark division between um, faith and reason in this, in some of these beliefs. Like if you have like a phenomenon of like natural pantheism where you believe in like sort of this thing that necessarily exists, that everything you know participates in it, then yeah, that's basically as far as reason can get you. I mean, but that thing isn't going to be explicable by reason. It just is, and so that's kind of as far as reason can actually take us.
Well, I mean, reason can definitely indicate the ultimate nature of reality, like the gold brick thing. So
Oh,
I
right.
so I
Yeah,
don't.
yeah. I mean, but that's but then I guess the reason why God doesn't want that is He desires us to freely accept Him through faith. And so if it was if there was something that was inconstitutable evidence of God, then people would have to accept it, through accept it through reason. Then it would destroy the possibility of faith, and God doesn't desire that.
Well, I mean, that's definitely not the case because I mean, people reject the flat Earth, and we've
Oh,
proven
sure,
the
yeah.
world is circular. But the problem here is that like if we had some kind of model of reality, said the ultimate nature of reality is string theory or whatever, and string theory predicts
Yeah.
absolutely everything that's going to happen every second from now till infinity and gets it right on every single occasion. We could just say, oh, here are all of the lottery numbers for the next 10,000 years, and it's right 100% of the time. We can fairly conclusively say string theory is right. It is the ultimate nature, and there isn't another one. Everything else was wrong. Especially if like string theory says, yeah, there's no God, there's no anything else. This is everything that's going to happen ever in the history of everything, and it gets everything right for the next like 10 years and continues to get things right. We can pretty conclusively conclude, yeah, there's no God, it's string theory. String theory is the correct fundamental nature of reality.
Well, I don't think string theory necessarily would preclude, that my definition of God.
Right,
That yeah.
the naturalistic pantheistic one, right? It wouldn't. So I would say that.
Well, yeah, but I don't call it naturalist pantheism, because there is, because it's distinguished that God, there's a distinction between the necessary being and all of the other beings.
Right, right. So to
Yeah.
be more specific, I'm saying like if string theory said there was no Yahweh, no Jesus, they did not exist, or something like that, then we could conclude
Mm.
that yeah, this one is the real representation of the ultimate nature of reality, and that one is the incorrect representation of ultimate reality. So
Oh yeah, if you could produce conclusive evidence that Jesus didn't exist, then yeah, then that would pretty much destroy Christianity.
sort of.
Absolutely.
What I'm saying is
Yeah.
that if we have a model of string theory that makes testable predictions about everything in the future, gets all of the lottery numbers right, tells us everything about what's going to happen in the
Mm.
universe, when black holes are going to come, every fact about the future is correct, and then it also tells us facts about the past, like Jesus didn't exist or something. Then
Mm.
we could conclude that the string theory is the ultimate nature of reality, just based off of the predictions it's made in the future that are all right with a really high level of accuracy. And then infer it's also right about the past, so there was no Jesus, Christianity is wrong,
Mm.
all of the other gods don't exist, that it says don't exist. So it could, we would be reasonable to conclude that through reason and logic that this is the ultimate nature of reality. And so reason can give us access to that, and it can be exclusionary towards other God hypotheses.
Hmm. Oh yeah, I guess so. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, again, like yeah, if yeah, there would be definitely a way of falsifying belief in Christianity, but but that's because there is these faith-based and sort of historical claims that kind of coincide, and so yeah, so there's not yeah, so yeah, I'm open to that line of argument, but that still kind of remains to be the case. That
Sure.
yeah,
Sure. Yeah. Obviously, we
yeah,
don't have that yet.
yeah,
That's for sure. I agree.
sure, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but yeah, I would say that we can absolutely use reason to indicate the ultimate nature of reality. We wouldn't need to uh, preclude us from being able to do so based off of some assumption of naturalism or anything.
Well, but you still can't. explain that, that the world is. You can't explain, and even Bertrand Russell says as much. He says that, that the existence of the world itself is mystery. That there is something rather than nothing. This is kind of, a fundamental question of philosophy.
Well, I'm not
And Heidegger said as
sure
much. Yeah.
what that has to do with the topic exactly. So, yes, reality exists, and we don't know why reality exists. But I
Yeah,
mean,
and then
but that would
and then
apply to
that's kind of,
literally anything that ever existed. So even if the Christian God was
yeah.
true, that would still apply to the Christian God. So I'm not sure.
Well, no, not necessarily. I think that the that the Christian God is compatible with the God of the philosophers, or this
No,
the
no, I'm talking
natural
just about this problem that
sort of
you've
thing.
brought up. You said that we can't explain why reality exists. Like, even if God exists, well, we can't explain why God exists as opposed to doesn't exist for the exact same reason. And if there's a solution you
Oh
propose
yeah,
to
yeah.
that,
Heidegger says as much. Yeah.
so like if you said, well, we can't explain it because God is necessary, has a necessary nature, we can just take the same answer and say, the universe, reality has a necessary nature, and just say, okay, well, we can then solve it for reality too without a God. So that same problem applies to anything that exists. The only real possibility is that its reality has some nature that it must exist inherently. That we won't be able to explain that, which is fine. We don't need to, like, because it's reality.
Yeah, but I mean, there's but the thatness of the world, it does sort of like, it does sort of beg, it begs the question, and I think Father Philip is right, is that it kind of does lead, that mystery sort of leads to wonder, even if we can't speak about it, even if we do have to kind of pass over it in silence. We do in our nature want to ask, why. And the understanding of God is something that does explain that why, because his essence, is to exist. And so,
We could just say
yeah.
that about reality itself and get rid of the God aspect. So no matter which hypothesis you adopt, they can all take that exact same answer.
Well, I mean, but I suppose the difference is that you have, when you have when you understand reality to be contingent, upon, other phenomena, then
Wait a minute.
they, yeah.
So reality is everything that exists. I don't think reality can be contingent.
Oh, no, no, yeah. There is some, but I guess that the difference between God is that God has an ontological relationship with reality, whereas we have a contingent relationship with reality.
Yeah, yeah.
And so,
So obviously there's things in reality that aren't necessary, and there are things in reality that would be necessary. But I don't think reality itself can only be contingent things. I don't think reality itself can just be contingent things. That would be weird.
yeah, because if it's made up entirely of contingent things, yeah, then it would be possible for nothing to exist.
Sure.
Yeah,
So when we're talking about reality, reality must be the necessary thing, or the most necessary thing must be in reality somewhere.
yeah,
If God
yeah.
exists, he exists in reality.
Well, no, because everything that exists inside reality, which is God.
That would still be in reality. So reality is again everything that exists. So if God exists, then he would be in reality.
Yeah, I mean, but he's not like a guy. He's not just like a being,
Well, that's
right? Like
fine. It doesn't
that's,
matter
yeah,
how he exists
yeah,
in reality. Reality just means all of the things that exist. So if he's
yeah.
one or all of the things that exist, he's still in reality. Because in reality doesn't mean like there's literally a box called reality and he's inside of that box somewhere.
Right,
It just
right.
means
Yeah, yeah,
one of the existing things.
yeah. Sure. I'm lost now, though. What we're talking about.
You brought up you were talking about how reality could be contingent in some way. I was confused by that. I don't know
Oh, right,
why.
right, right. No, yeah, I just meant, when I meant reality, I meant all the things that are in reality, that are at least observable, like existence. Yeah,
The known
yeah.
things.
Well, yeah, not even just the known things, that all the things, in a sense, and this is getting back to, like, the essentially ordered series, is that in order for them to be able to be causes, they have to be first caused, that they are necessarily, effects, so there is, you know, so but then yeah, you could have this naturalistic pantheistic argument, you know, where that thing isn't, you know, isn't necessarily conscious, and I don't think you can actually rationally argue for its consciousness unless you you know, you take the you know, some of those arguments that you get into with other uh, theists about, you know, that consciousness can arrive from its own self. But I mean, I'm not totally convinced by those from just a purely rationalistic perspective. Like you said, that's the composition fallacy, right? That it's
Yep.
like, yeah, but I mean, I guess like
Walls cannot come
my
from
question,
non-walls. But wait a minute, bricks aren't walls, and bricks make walls. So yes, they
but
can.
there still has to be like an agent for that cause to actually happen. Like, you know, the bricks themselves won't become walls unless they're acted upon.
Well, no, if we just like if there's a tornado or something, it can knock a bunch of wall bricks together and build a gigantic wall, not like
Yeah,
brick
but the
by brick.
tornado then the tornado would be the cause in that case.
Yeah, still a non-wall making a wall.
Oh yeah, but I mean, but it's caused. So the bricks actually are contingent upon that tornado
Yes.
to
So
become that wall.
I think all consciousness is caused. I think all consciousness is not a necessary thing. I think it's
Right, yeah. So, but then it would just be traceable back to sort of all of nature. But
yeah.
again, that fits again. That fits again with you know, my definition of God as well.
Okay.
Because you know, you could have consciousness arise through nature, through evolution, and all of those contingent sort of like, you know, realities that were necessary for making up consciousness could have just been how God arranged things to actually happen.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I guess we're at an impasse then.
Well, I think we like agreed on everything. I don't think there
Yeah,
was an
I know.
impasse there. Like, yes, I agree.
Yeah.
There's no way to differentiate between imagination from reality in context of a god. That's why I prefer atheism.
So I guess the only disagreement then is like, are you an atheist or a theist then, or am
Atheist.
I an atheist or a
Yeah.
theist? Okay, well, I think I'm a theist. So
So yeah,
yeah, so
it's
yeah,
you have faith. I do not have faith.
yeah, that's the difference. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Well, maybe we should just leave it at that.
Yeah, we've been going for a little over an hour anyway, so it's a good time
Okay.
to wrap up. So it was great having you
Cool.
on. Fun conversation. I mean,
Yeah.
I definitely appreciate talking with people like you who are honest interlocutors who aren't uh, dumb idiots like Ask Yourself. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you again. Ask Yourself is a Discord guy. We do not get along.
Oh,
So,
okay.
but
No,
yeah,
that was really fun.
yeah, appreciate it. It was a lot of fun
Okay.
talking with you, and I'll talk to you later.
Take care.